There is a groundbreaking development in Africa. The rift is several miles long, and some believe it is a sign the continent is splitting in two.
Hey everyone! So, big news coming out of Kenya's Rift Valley. A huge crack, about 50 feet deep, just popped up out of nowhere, totally surprising locals and scientists alike. This crack runs along Kenya's Great Rift Valley, and a lot of scientists are speculating that it could eventually split the continent right down the middle. But hold on, this isn't just a one-off thing. In the past month, the area has been hit by 31 strong earthquakes, including a pretty intense 5.8 magnitude quake. It looks like the East African rift is really starting to wake up, and this could be the beginning of something way more significant. In today's video, we're going to dive into how all this seismic activity might mean some major changes for East Africa in the future, like the potential creation of a new ocean that could totally reshape the continent. So, let's jump right in. Oh, and before we get started, don't forget to hit that like button down below. It really helps us out. Thanks a bunch. One of the wildest signs of this change is that massive crack in Kenya's Rift Valley. It shocked everyone, from the locals to the scientists. But this isn't just some random occurrence. It's part of a bigger geological drama playing out in the area. Just in the last month, 31 powerful earthquakes have rocked the region, raising fears that the East African rift is getting a bit shaky. The strongest quake, measuring 5.8, sent some serious shock waves through the area, showing just how intense things are getting. These quakes are stretching the fault lines that split Africa apart, slowly pulling the continent apart. The region around Ethiopia has been particularly active, with a bunch of shallow earthquakes causing a lot of worry. On December 29th, there was a 5.1 magnitude quake about 46 kilometers north of Matara, followed by another tremor of 4.7 just hours later. These tremors were pretty alarming since they happened only 10 kilometers below the surface, making them feel even stronger across a wide area, including Addis Ababa, the capital. Scientists think that rising magma under the volcano is adding to this seismic activity, and if the pressure keeps building, we could be looking at a major eruption. This recent uptick in earthquakes reminds us of a similar situation back in 1989, when a series of quakes were followed by some dramatic tectonic shifts and volcanic eruptions. The East African rift stretches over 3,000 kilometers and is one of the most seismically active spots on the planet. It marks the slow separation of the Nubian and Somalian tectonic plates, a process that's been reshaping the land for millions of years. Underneath the rift, intense heat from the Earth's mantle is weakening the crust, which fuels volcanic eruptions and powerful lava flows. All this seismic activity is a growing concern for the millions of people living nearby. Over 3.4 million folks live within 100 kilometers of the Tal volcano, putting them at risk not only from earthquakes, but also from the potential eruption of the volcano itself. Towns like Metuhora and Awash, located near active fault lines, keep experiencing tremors. While there hasn't been any major physical damage yet, experts are warning that this increased seismic activity could lead to bigger earthquakes, landslides, or even an eruption in the near future. So, definitely something to keep an eye on. The East African rift isn't just a cool geological feature. It's actually a powerful force of nature that's slowly but surely changing the African continent. Scientists think we're seeing the start of a huge transformation that could eventually split Africa into two separate land masses and create a new ocean. This process is going to take millions of years, but with more earthquakes and volcanic eruptions happening, it's clear that some big changes are already in motion. It's a strong reminder that the Earth is always evolving, and the ground we stand on isn't as stable as we might think. Stretching over 3,000 kilometers from the Red Sea down to Mozambique, the East African Rift is one of the most fascinating geological formations on the planet. It represents the slow drift of the Nubian and Somalian tectonic plates, which leads to frequent earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. This rifting is paving the way for a new ocean that could eventually divide Africa in two. Scientists say it'll take about 5 to 10 million years for this split to happen, but you can already see signs of Africa's future separation, with cracks and fissures popping up all over the place. One of the most eye-catching signs appeared in Kenya, where a massive 50-foot deep crack opened up in the Rift Valley, so deep you can't even see the bottom. But there's more going on beneath the surface, and scientists are warning that something much deeper could be happening. This fissure surprised both locals and scientists, showing that the land is shifting further north in Ethiopia's Afar region, which has a Y-shaped fracture in the Earth's crust. Seismic activity is on the rise, and this rifting could eventually let water from the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden flood the Rift Valley, creating a new ocean. If that happens, parts of Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, Eritrea, and Djibouti could break away from Africa and form a new island, kind of like Madagascar. As this rifting keeps going, the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden will gradually fill up the depression in the Rift Valley, speeding up the formation of this new ocean. Recently, there's been a spike in seismic activity, including a 5.8 magnitude earthquake and 31 strong tremors in just 1 month, showing that the region is becoming more unstable. Volcanic activity is also increasing at Fentol, a volcano that's been rumbling with tremors between 4.3 and 5.1 in magnitude. These tremors suggest that magma is moving up beneath the surface, making an eruption more likely. If Fentol, which last erupted in 18 CE, blows, it'll be a stark reminder of the powerful forces at work in the Rift Valley. Its summit has a massive caldera measuring 2.5 by 4.5 kilometers, showcasing the immense power beneath the Earth. Past eruptions, like one in 1250 CE, caused devastating lava flows that wiped out towns and churches. As seismic activity keeps ramping up, scientists are keeping a close eye on everything, warning that another eruption could be just around the corner. While the long-term changes in East Africa will reshape the continent over millions of years, the immediate worry is the danger to the millions of people living near the rift. Towns like Metamora, Wash, and Addis Ababa are already feeling the shakes, and experts are saying that the chance of bigger earthquakes, ground collapses, or even volcanic eruptions is pretty high. This shaky situation really shows how crucial it is to have better monitoring, preparedness, and awareness among the folks living in the area. East Africa is going through some major changes that are reshaping the land and changing how millions of people live. Scientists have been looking into these changes for a while, but recent events have made it clear that things are moving a lot faster than anyone expected. With more volcanic activity, frequent earthquakes, and the eventual birth of a new ocean, East Africa's future is looking very different, and it's already happening. What's driving these changes is deep down in the Earth. At the center of this transformation are mantle plumes, basically columns of superheated magma pushing up from the Earth's interior. As these plumes rise, they weaken the Earth's crust and create volcanic hotspots. This is what's been shaping East Africa, especially in places like the Rift Valley and highland regions in Ethiopia and Kenya. Over time, these forces have caused some dramatic geological shifts, including big lava eruptions that change the landscape drastically. Even though the recent eruptions have been pretty minor, there's still a real risk of a major eruption. Magma is piling up beneath volcanoes like Fantail in Ethiopia, which raises the chances of a catastrophic explosion. The earthquakes are happening more often too, which is another sign that something's brewing beneath the surface. Places like Matara and Awash are reporting regular tremors, and some of these quakes might be hiding even bigger shifts just waiting to happen. The lack of a local seismic monitoring system makes it tough for authorities to get a clear picture of the risks. They're relying on global monitoring and satellite data, but with every tremor, the possibility of a major eruption with dangerous lava flows, ash clouds, and aftershocks is growing. For millions living near these volcanoes, the threat is feeling very real. Scientists have long thought that Africa is slowly splitting into two separate land masses, and it's been predicted that a whole new ocean could form in the middle of the continent. But recent seismic activity shows that this rifting is happening way faster than anyone thought. The East African Rift, stretching over 3,000 kilometers from the Red Sea to Mozambique, marks where two tectonic plates, the Nubian and Somalian plates, are slowly pulling apart. While this has been happening very slowly for millions of years, recent earthquakes and volcanic activity suggest some areas are shifting much quicker. One of the most striking signs of this change is a massive 50-foot crack that just popped up in Kenya's Rift Valley. This fissure, along with 31 significant earthquakes in just 1 month, suggests that the rifting process is speeding up. Geologists are comparing this to the historical rifting that split South America and Africa apart millions of years ago, which eventually created the Atlantic Ocean. The Afar region in Ethiopia, where 3 tectonic plates meet, is a hotspot for this transformation. This area has been unstable and a center for intense geological activity for ages. Scientists believe that as the rift keeps widening, water from the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden will eventually flood this depression, creating a new ocean that will separate East Africa from the rest of the continent. Over the next 5 to 10 million years, this geological process will completely change the region. East Africa is on track to become its own island, kind of like Madagascar, as the land starts to break away from the mainland. This isn't just going to change the map, it's also going to affect the climate, wildlife, and economies in the area. Lately, there's been a lot of seismic and volcanic activity, and it looks like that's going to keep shaping East Africa's future. For instance, there was a pretty strong earthquake, a 5.8 magnitude one on December 29th, which got everyone worried about the magma moving under the rift. These changes are happening way faster than anyone thought, so scientists are keeping a close eye on the situation. But here's the catch. Local monitoring of seismic activity isn't great, which makes it hard to really understand how quickly the land is changing. Instead, scientists are using global data and satellite images to keep track of how the rift is progressing. It's a good reminder that Earth's geography is always changing. While it might seem like this is something for the future, the split of East Africa is happening right now, and it could seriously impact the lives of people living there. Countries like Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique might end up with new coastlines. Right now, though, the big issues are earthquakes, volcanoes, and land erosion that need constant attention. The full separation of East Africa is going to take millions of years, but we're already seeing some effects. The landscape we're used to could look pretty different in the future. The East African Rift is moving slowly, just a tiny bit each year, but it has the potential for some big changes. Major earthquakes can cause sudden shifts, bringing East Africa closer to splitting off from the rest of the continent. Geologists think it could take between 5 to 10 million years for the rift to turn into an ocean, eventually breaking apart parts of Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique. This process might create a new landmass, similar to how Madagascar broke away millions of years ago. Some researchers even think that before the whole thing splits apart, parts of Tanzania and Mozambique could break off, forming an inland sea for a while. This whole transformation of Africa's coastline is a lot like what happened when the supercontinent Pangaea broke apart. But it's not all smooth sailing, as there are serious risks for the millions of people living in the area. Recently, there have been thousands of significant earthquakes, including that 5.8 magnitude one on December 29th. It was felt in places like Matara and even in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia's capital. Just a day later, there was another quake measuring 4.7, raising worries about the ongoing instability in the region. People in the area are feeling regular tremors, which hints that smaller quakes are happening along with the big ones. One of the biggest worries from the widening rift in Kenya is the risk of ground collapse. A huge 50-foot wide crack just popped up in roads and farmland, forcing many families to leave their homes. These kinds of fissures might start showing up more often in the Rift Valley, which could really mess with homes, businesses, and important infrastructure. On top of that, there's been increased volcanic activity near Ethiopia's famous Tal volcano, raising concerns about possible eruptions that could spew out dangerous ash clouds and lava flows. The last time it erupted was back in 1820, and scientists are warning that we could see another eruption soon, which might displace tens of thousands of people. The economic fallout from these geological happenings is significant. The regions affected by the rift depend heavily on agriculture and livestock, both of which are super sensitive to seismic activity. If land shifts or volcanic eruptions destroy farmland, it could lead to food shortages and economic instability. Towns like Matara, with about 23,400 people, and Awash, home to 11,400, are located along key trade routes. If their roads and infrastructure get damaged, it could throw a wrench in transportation and commerce, putting these towns at risk of economic collapse, especially since they're not well prepared for disasters. The splitting of East Africa is part of a much older geological story. Scientists trace the continents back to a supercontinent called Pangaea, which existed around 300 million years ago when all the landmasses were connected by a huge ocean. Over millions of years, the Earth's surface has changed a lot, with earlier supercontinents like Rodinia and Gondwana breaking apart long before Pangaea. This ongoing cycle of landmasses coming together and breaking apart is known as the Wilson cycle, and it has shaped our planet into what we see today. A clear example of this is the separation of South America and Africa about 180 million years ago, which created the Atlantic Ocean. The East African Rift is a current example of these geological forces at work. In the next 5 to 10 million years, the rift is likely to widen, potentially creating a new ocean and splitting East Africa from the rest of the continent. The forces from shifting tectonic plates and rising magma have been shaping the Earth for billions of years, and the East African Rift gives us a rare live look at these geological processes happening today. According to NASA's Earth Observatory, the slow thinning of the crust in this region suggests that a new ocean might be on the horizon, continuing the cycle of Earth's dynamic changes. The East African Rift is undergoing some serious changes, but this also comes with real risks. The area is known for its seismic activity, experiencing frequent earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Just in 1 month, there were 31 strong earthquakes, including a 5.8 magnitude quake near Ethiopia's Fenton volcano. All these constant tremors and rising magma below the surface implied that more volcanic eruptions could be coming. However, it's tough to predict exactly when and where these events will happen. The region doesn't have its own seismic monitoring system, so scientists rely on global networks that only catch the strongest quakes, which leaves many smaller ones undetected. This makes it even trickier to forecast eruptions accurately. The situation is further complicated by the lack of historical data on seismic activity in East Africa. Unlike places like California or Japan, where they have extensive networks of seismic stations recording detailed earthquake data, much of the East African rift is still poorly studied. Scientists use satellite images and GPS to track slow movements, but these methods can't pick up small quakes or underground volcanic activity. This makes predicting major events a tough task, putting millions of people at risk. While it's tough to predict these natural disasters, experts agree that the shifting landscape of East Africa will dramatically change the world in the near future. We can expect more earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and ground fissures, all of which will threaten local communities. But over millions of years, this transformation will also create new ecosystems, landforms, and even open up sea access for countries like Ethiopia and Uganda. As the Earth's tectonic plates keep drifting apart, we're witnessing a huge geological event that will reshape the planet's future for a long time. The forces at play now are not just changing the land, but also the course of Earth's history.